Good morning. This is Rajeshkumar. Today we are going to analyze one problem question on tort law, especially on the trespass to the person. The video content has been made available for informational and educational purpose only. Kindly go through this slide completely. The Slogs are the retro 70s band who perform in local pubs and clubs at weekends. The member are Ryan, the guitarist, Brad, who plays bass, Grace, the vocalist, Mooney, the drummer. One Saturday evening, the Grace grows impassioned with Brad and they gently elbow him out of her way so that she can get to the microphone. But Brad turns and pushes her hard, causing her to fall and hit her head on Mooney's drum kit. RK, who is a keen fan of Grace, runs from the audience to help her, shouting at Brad, I will get you if you touch her again. Arcade trips over a wire and crashes into Rayon, knocking him to the floor and breaking Rayon's arm. Arcade then grabs the Brad, leads him backstage into the toilet, and forbids him to leave. Grace has sustained a minor concussion, and Brad suffers from an attack of claustrophobia. We have to advise all these parties. In this scenario, several instances of trespass to the person arises, covering the assault, battery, false imprisonment, and possible negligence. Battery occurs when focus is applied directly and intentionally to another person without lawful justification. This tort does not require actual harm but focuses on the unauthorized contact. In Wilson versus Pringle case, established that the contact must be intentional and importantly hostile to constitute battery. Here, Brad pushing the Grace can be classified as a battery, then pushing was intentional, direct, and led to the Grace minor injury when she hit her head on the drum kit. The action of pushing with a clear frustration suggests hostility. Similarly, Oki colliding with Ryan due to his trip could be argued as unintentional. According to Lichang versus Cooper, accidental harm without negligence does not constitute bad. In other words, Gray's elbowing of Brad. Grace gently elbows Brad, intending to move him aside so he can reach the microphone. This act could technically constitute a battery as it involves intentional physical contact without consent. Battery is defined in Collins versus Wilcock in 1984 case as the actual infliction of unlawful force on another person. However, given the minor nature of the Gray's Act and the implied tolerance in a crowded, high energy setting, it might be seen as acceptable under Wilson versus Pringle in 1987, where it was held that contact must be hostile to constitute the battery. Here, Gray's action likely lacks the hostility necessary to qualify as battery. What about the Brad push of the Grace? The Brad's response, pushing the Grace hard enough that she fall and hit her head, goes beyond what might be considered reasonable or proportionate. In Lane versus Holloway in 1968, a disproportionate force in response to minor provocation was found to constitute battery. Given the Brad's excessive response, it is likely he would be liable for the battery as the force he used for exceeded what was needed to address the Gray's minor contact. Let's move on to the second issue. Okay, threat to Brad. Okay, shout, I will get you if you touch her again, could amount to assault. In Reed versus Cooker in 1853, it was established that a conditional threat made in a way that causes someone to fear immediate harm can constitute assault. Given the context and Orky anger, Brad may reasonably fear immediate harm and making this a likely case of assault. The Orky crashed into Ryan. When Orky turned towards Grace, he trips on the wire and accidentally crashes into Ryan, breaking Ryan's arm. This action could be considered as battery since in Scott versus Shepard in 1773, the whole court held that actions leading to unintended harm can still meet the definition of battery if the harm is a direct result of the act. However, as the collision was unintentional, it may alternately be framed as negligence depending on whether the OK exercised reasonable care while running. But since the negligence and intent do not overlap easily in tort law, the unintentional nature might reduce OK's liability for the battery in favor of a negligence approach. In other words, assault in tort law involves an act that causes the claimant to reasonably apprehend imminent application of force. In Stephen versus Meyer's case, clarifies that even if the defendant cannot immediately follow through with their threat, the perception of impending harm is enough. Hawk is shouting, I will get you, touch her again if you touch her again at Brad could constitute an assault as it induced apprehension of further violence. Let's move on to the third issue, Orke and Brad, the false imprisonment. Orke's confinement of Brad. After grabbing the Brad, Orke takes him backstage and detains him in the toilet, preventing him from leaving. This could clearly constitute the false imprisonment as it involves the unlawful restriction of Brad's freedom of movement. In Birds versus Jones, in 1845 case, held that a false imprisonment occurs when a person's movement is totally restricted. Here, Orke's confinement of Brad satisfied these conditions, creating a strong case for false imprisonment. In other words, the false imprisonment recurs an unlawful restraint of a person's freedom of movement without consent or legal authority. The Orcas action of confining the brat in the toilet backstage constitute a false imprisonment. The act was intentional and involved the confinement of Brad, limiting his freedom. The case, the Bird versus Jones, illustrates the need for the total restriction of the movement to establish a false imprisonment. Let's discuss the final issue, the injuries and damages, the Grace confusion. Grace suffers a confusion due to the Brad's push. This injury is directly caused by Brad's excessive force, making him liable for her physical harm and any associated damages. Whereas the Brad's claustrophobia, the Brad's claustrophobia attack may also be the actionable as physiological harm that results from direct actions such as false imprisonment can give rise to the damage. However, the claims for physiological injury in tort require the proof of a medically recognized condition which might complicate Brad's claim. In other words, negligence requires a duty of care, a breach of the duty, and the resultant harm. Orchis trip over the wire, which led to Ryan's broken arm, can be assessed for the negligence if it's found that Orchid was not taking reasonable care when running towards the stage. However, if it was merely an unfortunate accident without fault, as in the case of Howard and Lanning case, suggests that negligence may not be established. Let's conclude. Each party may have a legal recourse under the tort of trespass to the person. Grace may be sue Brad for battery. Brad may sue OK for assault and false imprisonment. And Rayon may consider a negligence claim against OK depending on the circumstances. In other words, liable to Brad, the liable to Grace for battery due to his disproportionate response of her elbowing, and the Grace case potentially liable for minor battery in elbowing Brad, although it is unlikely to succeed as a claim due to a minimal force used. About the RK, the liable to Brad for false imprisonment and possibly liable to Ryan for the battery or negligence due to accidental collision. Each individual has a potential claims based on the specific elements of the trespass, but Brad and OK likely face the strongest liabilities due to their actions causing direct physical harm and unlawful confinement. Thank you.